Number 10. The Great Unhappiness Myth. Okay, let's get the most obvious and laziest explanation out of the way first. You scroll through those sepia-toned images of stern-looking ancestors and your brain, trained on a diet of Instagram filters and forced vacation smiles, comes to a simple conclusion. Life back then must have been an endless festival of misery. The Industrial Revolution was chugging along. Medicine was basically just leeches and optimistic malpractice, and the most exciting form of entertainment was watching a pig get stuck in a fence. So, naturally, no one ever smiled. It makes a sad, simple kind of sense, except it's completely wrong. It's the historical equivalent of assuming everyone in the 90s wore neon windbreakers and only communicated through catchphrases from Friends. People in the 19th century were not a monolith of grumpy-faced automatons. They fell in love. They told bad jokes. They got drunk and danced. They found joy in the same stupid little things we do. We have their letters, their diaries, their novels, all bursting with humor, passion, and life. The idea that they were all perpetually auditioning for a role as a joyless Victorian ghost is a modern invention, projected backward by our own smile-obsessed culture. The truth is, the lack of smiles in old photos has almost nothing to do with a lack of happiness. It has everything to do with a bizarre cocktail of technology, culture, and some truly terrible dental hygiene. The blank expressions aren't a window into their miserable souls. They're a window into a time when pointing a camera at someone was a very, very different game. So, let's not judge great-great-grandma Mildred for looking like she's about to foreclose on an orphanage. Her life was probably fine. The photographer just told her to look like that. Number 9. The exposure time nightmare. Imagine you've decided to get your photo taken. This isn't a whimsical spur-of-the-moment decision. This is an event. You've put on your finest, stiffest clothes, the kind with more buttons than a space shuttle cockpit, and you've traveled to a stuffy, chemical-smelling studio. The photographer, a man who looks like he's about to conduct an autopsy on you, positions you in a chair. Then he brings out the brace. It's a cold metal clamp that he fastens to the back of your head and neck, designed to hold you perfectly, unnervingly still, because you're not just posing for a snapshot. You're about to endure the photographic marathon known as early exposure times. In the mid-1800s, a daguerreotype could require an exposure time of anywhere from 1 to 15 minutes. Sacre de Royal. Your job is to sit there without moving a single muscle, while a giant wooden box with a glass eye slowly burns your image onto a piece of silver-plated copper. Now, try holding a genuine natural smile for 30 seconds. Your face starts to twitch. Your cheeks cramp. Your grin morphs into a pained, horrifying grimace that looks less like joy and more like you've just witnessed a squirrel heist. Now imagine holding that for 5 minutes. Or 10. It's physically impossible. The human face is not built for sustained, motionless grinning. The most you could hope for was a neutral, relaxed expression. A slight Mona Lisa-esque hint of a smile might be achievable, but a full, toothy grin. You'd end up looking like a blurry, demented ghost. The photographers knew this. Their goal was a sharp, clear image, and the easiest way to get that was to have the subject adopt a pose they could actually hold without their face melting into a puddle of regret. So you sat there, clamped into place, staring into the middle distance, thinking about absolutely nothing, for minutes on end. Basically, early photography was just forced public meditation. Number 8. A Mouthful of Nightmares. Let's be brutally honest for a moment. If you had a time machine and your first stop was London in 1860, the very first thing you'd notice, after the horse manure and the suffocating coal smoke, would be the teeth, or, more accurately, the horrifying lack thereof. We live in an era of obsessive dental care, where teeth whitening is a casual Tuesday afternoon activity, and a slightly crooked incisor is cause for a multi-year financial commitment to an orthodontist. Our ancestors did not have this luxury. For most of human history, dentistry was a terrifying blend of blacksmithing and guesswork. A toothache didn't mean a root canal. It meant pliers, a shot of whiskey for courage, and a whole lot of screaming. Sugar was becoming more common, but fluoride toothpaste and water flossers were not. The result was a population whose mouths were, to put it delicately, a disaster zone. We're talking rampant decay, missing teeth, blackened stumps, and gums that had seen better days. It was a periodontal apocalypse. So, when it came time to have your portrait made, an expensive, permanent record of your existence, were you going to flash a wide grin and show the world your collection of oral goblins? Absolutely not. You were going to keep that mouth clamped shut like a bank vault. A closed-mouth expression was a simple, effective way to hide the fact that your smile looked like a haunted piano. It wasn't about being sad. It was about vanity. It was the 19th century version of only taking photos from your good side, or using a filter that smooths out your skin. They were curating their image, and that meant keeping the dental horror show under wraps. Their stoic, serious face wasn't a sign of misery. It was a sign of dignity, and frankly, good sense. Number 7. Smiling was for idiots. In our modern world, smiling is the default setting. We smile at strangers. We smile in meetings. We smile for ID photos, turning what should be a simple identification tool into a bizarre contest of who can look the most pleasantly unthreatening. A smile is seen as a sign of warmth, confidence, and friendliness. But back in the day, a wide, toothy grin had the complete opposite meaning. For centuries, the only people depicted with big, goofy smiles were the poor, the drunk, the insane, or the village fool. In serious European and American culture, a constant smile was not a sign of a happy, well-adjusted person. It was a sign of frivolity, simple-mindedness, and a lack of self-control. A dignified, intelligent, and respectable person kept their emotions in check. Your face was a reflection of your character, and a serious, composed expression signaled gravitas, wisdom, and social standing. Flashing your teeth like a cheerful idiot was simply not something a person of substance did in public, let alone for a formal portrait that would outlive them. This wasn't just some unwritten rule. It was reflected in etiquette guides and popular wisdom of the time. Mark Twain, a man famous for his humor, even commented on it, famously writing, "A photograph is a most important document, and there is nothing more damning to go down to posterity than a silly, foolish smile caught and fixed forever." Think about it. When you see a portrait of a king, a queen, or a powerful historical figure, are they giggling? No. They look serious, powerful, and a little bit intimidating. The early subjects of photography were simply following that established cultural script. A smile was for the tavern, not for the history books. Number 6. Following the painter's lead. Before there were cameras, there were painters. For centuries, the only way to get a permanent image of yourself was to commission a portrait, a process that was astronomically expensive and took weeks, if not months. The entire tradition of portrait painting was built on capturing a person's essence, their status, and their timeless character, not a fleeting momentary emotion. You weren't paying a master artist a small fortune to paint you in the middle of a sneeze or a belly laugh. You were paying for a legacy. When photography arrived on the scene, it wasn't seen as a brand new art form with its own rules. It was seen as painting with light, a faster, more scientific way to achieve the exact same thing as a painted portrait. So, all the conventions, aesthetics, and social rules of portrait painting were ported directly over to photography. The goal was the same: to create a formal, dignified, and lasting image of the subject. And in the world of formal portraiture, nobody smiled. Look at the portraits of the Renaissance or the Baroque period. The subjects are serene, powerful, thoughtful, or melancholic. Their expressions are meant to convey their inner world, their social position, and their moral character. A smile was considered too temporary, too trivial for such a serious medium. Early photographers and their clients were simply continuing this centuries-old tradition. They saw the camera as a tool for creating an heirloom, not a disposable snapshot. So, the poses were stiff, the backdrops were formal, and the expressions were neutral, all in an effort to mimic the high art of painting. It wasn't until photography became cheaper and more accessible that it started to break free from these painterly chains and develop an identity of its own. Number 5. The awkward family photo. With a corpse. Alright, buckle up, because this is where things get genuinely unsettling. In the Victorian era, mortality rates were brutally high, especially for children. Life was fragile, and photography was new and expensive. This created a strange and poignant tradition: post-mortem photography. For many families, the only photograph they would ever have of a lost loved one, particularly a young child, would be one taken after they had already passed away. These weren't meant to be morbid or ghoulish. They were cherished mementos, a final tangible connection to someone they had lost. The deceased were often posed as if they were merely sleeping. They would be propped up in chairs, placed in a crib, or even held in the arms of their grieving parents and siblings. The goal was to create an image of peaceful, eternal rest. The defining characteristic of these photos was a serene, still, and calm expression, the look of sleep, not death. This popular practice had a powerful, if subconscious, influence on how the living were photographed too. The aesthetic of the peaceful, sleeping face became intertwined with the very idea of a formal portrait. A calm, neutral, almost somber expression was seen as timeless and dignified. The same look that was used to memorialize the dead. A lively, smiling face, by contrast, felt jarringly temporary and out of place in a medium so closely associated with memory and loss. In a weird way, the living were posing like the dead to ensure their own portraits achieved a sense of permanence and gravitas. So, when you see that photo of your ancestor looking profoundly still and serious, it's not just because of exposure times. It's because the visual language of photography was partially born in the quiet rooms of mourning. Number 4. It was a big deal. Today, you probably have more photos of your lunch from last week than a 19th century person had of their entire family over a lifetime. We treat photography like it's air. Abundant, free, and completely disposable. We take 100 selfies just to get one we don't immediately delete. For our ancestors, getting a photograph taken was the complete opposite. It was a rare, expensive, and deeply significant event. You didn't just get a pic. You commissioned a portrait. This involves saving up money, scheduling an appointment, and treating the whole affair with the solemnity of a wedding or a baptism. You would wear your absolute best clothes, often stiff, formal, and uncomfortable. The entire process was designed to be monumental. This wasn't for your social media feed. This was a permanent artifact that would represent you to your descendants. It was your one shot at immortality, a visual record that would say, "I existed, and I was a person of substance." Given that context, would you show up to this once-in-a-lifetime event with a goofy, casual grin on your face? No way. You'd adopt the most formal, dignified, and serious pose you could muster. You were trying to project respectability, class, and importance. It's the same reason people don't typically wear sweatpants and a novelty t-shirt to a presidential inauguration. The gravity of the occasion demands a certain level of seriousness. A smile would have felt inappropriate, disrespectful to the process, and it would have undermined the very purpose of the photograph: to create a lasting, honorable legacy. They weren't being grumpy. They were just taking it seriously, because for them, it was serious. Number 3. Just say prunes. Every kid who grew up in the age of film cameras knows the classic instruction shouted from behind the lens: say cheese. The long E sound in cheese pulls your lips back into a wide, tooth-bearing grin. It's a simple, effective phonetic trick to force a smile onto someone's face. But in the 19th and early 20th centuries, photographers used a different word for a very different reason. They would tell their subjects to say prunes. Go ahead, say it out loud. Prunes. Notice what your mouth does. It doesn't create a wide, happy smile. It pulls your lips together into a small, tight, neutral shape. The goal wasn't to elicit joy. The goal was to make the mouth look small and taut. A large, relaxed mouth was considered unattractive and unrefined. The prunes trick was a piece of technical direction aimed at achieving a very specific aesthetic, a look of quiet, controlled dignity. This little piece of trivia speaks volumes about the desired outcome of a portrait session. The ideal look wasn't happy, it wasn't friendly, and it certainly wasn't toothy. It was small, neat, and proper. This wasn't about capturing a personality, but about conforming to a beauty standard. A big, expressive mouth was seen as vulgar, while a small prune-like pout was the height of sophistication. So, while your modern family portrait might be a chorus of cheese, your great-great-grandmother's portrait was more likely a quiet, collective whisper of prunes. And honestly, thinking about a room full of people in corsets muttering about dried plums is way funnier than thinking they were all just sad. Number 2. The Intimidation Factor. Let's talk about the user experience of getting your photo taken in 1880. It was not a fun, friendly, or relaxing experience. The camera wasn't a sleek, silent rectangle you hold in your hand. It was a massive, imposing piece of furniture. A giant wooden box on a heavy tripod, shrouded in a black cloth, with a huge glass lens that looked less like an instrument of art and more like a piece of scientific equipment designed to dissect your soul. The photographer would disappear under the black cloth, becoming a disembodied voice barking instructions. The studio itself was often a sterile, intimidating space, filled with the sharp, alien smells of developing chemicals. There would be bright, harsh lights, or giant reflectors to bounce sunlight onto your face. And let's not forget the head clamp, the immobilizer, pressing its cold metal fingers against your skull to ensure you didn't dare move. The entire atmosphere screamed serious medical procedure, not let's capture a fun memory. Now, in that environment, are you feeling relaxed, spontaneous, and joyful? Or are you feeling a little bit like a bug under a microscope, It's hard to muster a genuine, happy-go-lucky smile when you're being physically restrained and stared down by a wooden cyclops. The technology itself was unfriendly. It demanded stillness, silence, and patience. The whole process was so far removed from the candid, easygoing nature of modern photography that it's no wonder the results look so different. The subjects look serious because they were in a serious, slightly terrifying situation. Their expressions don't reflect their inner emotional state. They reflect the deeply weird and unnatural process they were being subjected to. Number 1. The soul, not the selfie. Perhaps the most profound reason for the lack of smiles is a philosophical one. In the 19th century, a portrait, whether painted or photographed, wasn't meant to capture a moment. It was meant to capture a person. The goal was to create an image that conveyed the subject's entire character, their moral fiber, their inner essence, their soul. And a smile, by its very nature, is a fleeting emotion. It's a temporary flicker across the face, a reaction to a specific momentary stimulus. To the Victorian mind, fixing such a temporary expression forever in a portrait would be a misrepresentation of the person. It would be like trying to define a whole ocean by a single wave. A neutral, contemplative expression, on the other hand, was seen as a blank canvas onto which the viewer could project a person's true character. It was a look of permanence, of depth, of substance. It invited you to look into the person, not just at their face. They believed that the true self was revealed in stillness, not in a momentary flash of glee. This is the polar opposite of our modern approach. We use photos to capture moments, the birthday party, the vacation, the funny thing the cat did. The smile is the proof that the moment was happy. Our photos are about documenting fleeting experiences. Theirs were about documenting eternal being. When you look at those old, unsmiling portraits, you're not seeing unhappy people. You're seeing people who believed a photograph should be a window to the soul, not just a record of a good time. It's a fundamentally different, and in some ways, much more ambitious, idea of what a picture is even for. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.